G'day everybody, welcome back to the ScaleHQ podcast. I'm your host Sean Steele, and today I'm going to be talking about how to take big bets in business and in life without blowing yourself up. And why am I talking about that today? Well, every founder I know took a lot of risks to get to where they are, but it's not like it's a one-off risk. You know what I mean? It's not like you make the one big risk, which of course is starting the business. That is absolutely a huge risk. But then you get these additional risk points where you have your risk appetite checked and tested. And every founder I know wants growth and freedom and often bigger opportunities. But sometimes when it comes to making the big decision, they hesitate. And why is that? Because it comes with big risks. And sometimes when you've taken big risks in the past, your risk appetite can reduce, and your appetite, therefore, taking bigger bets or looking like an idiot if you get it wrong, or the sort of downside consequences becomes too much. And I've made a couple of big bets in my life, and a client reminded me of two of these recently, one life one and one business one. The life one was moving to Cyprus, but that was about 14 months ago now. And, completely packed up our life and packed a couple of suitcases and just started again in a new country. And the business one was actually acquiring my first business. And both of them were high risk, high reward plays, no question, big trade-offs. But actually, when I reflected on it, they both taught me the same lessons about how to think about taking big swings and, I guess mitigate the downside, like not blow yourself up in the process. And so today what I thought I'd do for you is break down 5 principles I think about when I'm making major business and life decisions. And so whether you're thinking about, on the business side, making a big investment in scaling efforts, or, building a whole sales and marketing capability, or making an acquisition for the first time, or making a major investment, taking on a major partner, or some, kind of major risky event. Or on the life side, maybe it's about a complete reinvention in your life. You might be deciding whether to have kids with a new partner, or deciding whether to get married, or deciding whether to move countries or change businesses. But by the end of the episode, you're going to have not only a clear framework for those 5 principles, but also, I guess, give you an opportunity to think about whether you should take the leap or whether you're just kind of chasing a dream without a plan. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the Cyprus example in those principles and also the acquisition of the business example. Let's get stuck into it.
Welcome to the ScaleHQ podcast. I am Sean Steele, and I'm a growth mentor, digital nomad, a massive metalhead, and the founder of ScaleHQ. And you, more importantly, are a founder of a 7 or 8 figure services business who is finally ready to get serious about scaling up or securing a step back from your business or a life-changing exit in the next 3 to 5 years. And if that's you, then you are in the right place, because with over 100 million in revenue growth across my last 4 companies and many acquisitions under my belt, I have spent my whole career figuring out what makes businesses more valuable, scalable, and sellable. And I've learned a couple of things, and I'm thrilled to have an opportunity to share those with you today. So welcome to your fortnightly dose of practical strategy, founder success stories, and expert deep dives to help you finally get a return on all that sacrifice that you've made in your business. Welcome to the show. Let's dive right in.
What are the principles to start with? I'll just do them one by one, and I'll start with the Cyprus example, then we'll do the business one. Principle number 1, big bets have big trade-offs. Okay, that might sound obvious, but there's no reward without risk. When I think about the Cyprus example, moving to Cyprus mean like a trade-off, leaving behind this very comfortable, safe, familiar environment. All of my professional networks are there. My entire career had been really spent in Australia. Lifestyle, I had lots of familiarity. I had all of the life stuff set up, which you can easily take for granted. Where's your gym? Where's your hairdresser? Where's your mechanic? You've got accounting set up, you've got finance set up, you've got insurances, you know where to go, where the best cafes are, where the restaurants are, you know how to get around, you know how the government bureaucracy works, you know how everything just works and you become familiar with it. So I had this sort of predictable life, let's put it that way, and a great life, but a predictable one. And the trade-off was a potential move to Cyprus, a rebase in Europe. And given my kids were getting older and they're now 19 and 16, we were asking ourselves, where do we want to be based for the next 10 years, 20 years or more? What do we want our life to look like? And we wanted to be traveling places that you can only really access from Europe that are really difficult to access from Australia. Last year, we did visit 12 countries last year in short trips, and it was just awesome. So what was the trade-off though? It was hopefully a better lifestyle, a more relaxed, lifestyle, but also lots more freedom, less red tape, lower living costs, easy access of travel, and the challenge of reinventing my business. ScaleHQ in a new setting and doing it remotely, which was going to require a whole bunch of new things. So that was the trade-off. Predictable life versus this, exciting, challenging, travel-infused freedom. And I think sometimes people avoid these big moves because they fear what they're going to lose rather than focusing on what they might gain. First, the trade-off, that was kind of a tick for me. I was like, you know what? I like predictable, but I actually value more adventure and experience and travel. So that's a tick for me. That's what I want to, I'm comfortable with that trade-off. That's the risk, but that's also the reward. Now, if you are keen to step your business up to the next level, like by taking on an investor or stepping back and installing management so that you can enjoy dividends and get out of operations, or perhaps you want to secure a life-changing exit in the next 5 years in your business, well, whichever one of those three things you want, you are going to have to really think about what you prioritize over the next few years, because it's going to matter a lot as to whether you actually achieve those or not. And that's why you're going to love my Scale Scorecard that I've developed. It is a new diagnostic tool which I'm making available for free so that you can figure out where you're at right now and what you should focus on next. But it is not some made-up fluff that I read in a book. This is real-world scaling, investments, exits. If you would like to maximize your chance of securing that step up or the step back or the step out, then come and find out your Scale Score at scalescorecard.com.au and click the button to take the quiz. Okay, number 2, reverse engineer the risk before you commit to it. So you're asking yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen? If we do this thing, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, in Cyprus, that meant, okay, we sell off we sell off any investments that we've got. We pack up all our bags. We've literally got nothing to come back with, no cars. We've sold furniture. We've sold clothing. We've sold literally everything we own. We've come over with 2 suitcases. What happens if it doesn't work? What if we get there in 3 months or 6 months, 12 months and we hate it? Well, we could always relocate back. And we thought, well, that's not that bad. What's the best case scenario? Okay, best case is I build a great business in Cyprus and I absolutely love life there. For me, it's what would have to be true for this move to succeed, for this decision to work out? And for me, it was okay, well, my business needs to work. I need, sufficient financial stability for the family, and I need the family to buy into this adventure. If those 3 things are in place, then actually my worst case is pretty covered, because I know worst case, I can just relocate back. It may be uncomfortable. It might be annoying. I might feel like I'm coming back with my tail between my legs, but actually I can handle that as the downside. That's worst case. I can deal with that as long as I've got a business that works remotely, financial stability, and my family is on board. So tick number 2. Principle number 3, mitigate the downside. Okay, so that's assessing what is the worst case, but then how do you mitigate the likelihood that the worst case occurs? How do you prepare before you jump? So I structured my business to run remotely before moving. I had all of my clients were already virtual first. And so yes, we did 1 or 2 advisory boards face-to-face a year, but broadly speaking, all of my clients were always already virtual first. I'd also moved everybody to afternoons because in the 12 months leading up to it, I was doing 9 a.m. calls, but I knew when I moved to Cyprus, I'd be doing 6 a.m. calls, which would be 2 in the afternoon or 3 in the afternoon in Australia. Sometimes it's actually 5 a.m. and sometimes it's 7 a.m. But that means I need to get up at pretty much 4 a.m. every day, sometimes even 3 to be on calls. That was part of the trade-off consideration. But this was about how do I protect the downside? Well, I'd set my business up already rhythmically to know that I could do it remote first from Australia. Second, I had made sure that we had financial capacity and stability and everything before we moved. So we weren't going to be in if anything kind of went wrong, or I don't know, I got there and on day 1, all of my clients said, we can't handle the fact that you're in Cyprus and we're all quitting. We were going to be fine and we'd be okay. And that wouldn't necessitate a move back in any short period of time. And we also then planned the logistics a long way in advance. So we came and did a 6-week recce in late 22. We liked Cyprus. And in the next 12 months, we planned and prepared everything, tax structures, new companies, everything that we were going to need. I'd reached out to the co-working spaces. I found a place that I got an office organized. I'd connected with other Australians here in the Cypriot community. So I'd built some friendship networks. I'd already built some connections. We tested out and developed those connections whilst we were here in our recce. We went home and I had to organize not only a life move, but a complete business overhaul. And again, when you just think about all the things that already work, like you have an accountant, you have a software package that works, you understand how the tax system works, all of these, the structures that you might have trusts or whatever you've got in place. I had to do all of that again. But I had 12 months in which to plan it. So I planned and I made sure there was no blind leap, just lots of calculated action. Number 4, don't wait for perfect conditions. You have to commit and then adapt. There was never going to be a perfect time to move. We could have waited until Sebastian, my 16-year-old, finished school. He was at that stage 14 and still in year 8 or 9, I guess. And so the question was, do we wait until he's finished school? But then we thought, what's we're robbing him of the upside opportunity if we wait for the perfect conditions. If we wait for him to finish school, then he misses out on the opportunity to actually have an international experience, which we both had as kids, and we absolutely loved it. And it was a huge part of our memories and stories. So if I'd waited until everything was safe and certain, I'd still be in Australia now. And so action always starts to create clarity. And probably one thing Anna and I are certainly known for is when we make a decision, that's it. We've burned the boats. We're moving forward on the decision, and then everything else just has to happen. So we decided we were going to make the move, trusted that we would just adjust if we needed to, and we started planning and going. Principle number 5 is that fear is normal, but that doesn't mean that it's the wrong decision. So fear is normal. Like, this is about, like, taking calculated risks is not reckless. So was I nervous about this move? Like, we got back to Australia after this 6-week recce and I was like, are we going to do this? And we just looked at each other and said, let's give it a crack. What's the worst thing going to happen? And was I free of fear? No, absolutely not. Like, the next 12 months, there was a strong level of anxiety. There was mixed excitement and mixed anxiety, because nerves doesn't mean that it's the wrong move. Nerves or fear means, I think it's a message from, Tony Robbins, and I learned 20 years ago, fear is a message for you to get prepared. So we prepared, and fear means you're probably going to be in an uncomfortable situation, but that's also exciting if you like growth, because you only ever get growth in uncomfortable situations. Otherwise you're not pushing forward. So I had a solid plan. We built in contingencies. I had a mindset that was like, I'm going to figure this out. So that's the Cyprus example. But I thought you'd also appreciate a business example. Let's take those same principles and apply it to the first acquisition I did, because that was scary, probably scarier. Let's go back to principle number 1. Big bets come with big trade-offs. So no risk without reward. Okay, well, this was a business doing $35 million in revenue that had gone sideways for 5 years, but it was only doing $100,000 in profit. Like, what's the risk if you get that acquisition wrong? What if it goes backwards by 20% in the first 12 months? Well, you're going to be burning $7 million a year. Like, okay, it might only have 100,000. Okay, so let's assume it's got no profit whatsoever. You get it wrong and your expenses blow out by 20%, or your revenue falls off by 20%. You have a huge problem. So it was massive risk. And of course, I would personally lose credibility. I was the CEO of a new portfolio, and me and my team would lose the credibility of being able to actually buy a business and execute a turnaround. On the upside, this had the opportunity to be a super valuable asset because I had such limited profitability, we were able to buy it cheaply. And the upside is, okay, what if you can get it from $0 profit to 20% profit? It's going to be generating $7 million of EBITDA. That's a big opportunity in terms of the return from the growth of this business. So every big opportunity comes with something, painful that you have to let go of. So that was my first trade. I was like, it's big risk, no question, but it's also massive reward. So asymmetric sort of reward. Check number 2, reverse engineer the risk before you commit to it. Okay, so what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst thing that could happen? And can we live with that? All right, well, let's say that revenue declines by 5 to 8%. It's probably not going to be more than that. Like, we'd have to be doing pretty poorly if it tailed off more than that. Well, how far could we cut expenses to stop the bleeding if that happened? And we were confident that actually we could probably cut deep enough to stop the bleeding if we needed to, so we could get comfortable with the potential revenue decline. Best case, we execute well, we significantly improve profitability. That question came up again. So, what has to be true for this deal to work, for this decision to be the right one? Well, I knew what had to be true was we were going to have a good execution plan, rapid control of the environment. So rapid control of the cash, of the leadership, of the messaging, of the communication. And I needed a leadership team that I could believe in, that could drive the change necessary. Because it was a great business. It wasn't a broken business. It just wasn't being well led. And we knew that we could turn it around. And I knew I had a great team to do that. So that passed the second check. Yep, we reverse engineered the risk. We can handle the worst case. Okay, number 3, mitigate the downside. How do you prepare before you jump? How do you reduce the risk of that worst case actually happening? Well, what do? We built a really detailed 100-day plan before we signed the deal. Well, before we'd actually signed the deal and paid the money, we had a 100-day plan of how we're going to execute this. It had 6 critical areas. So onboarding, which is really about the sort of change of control. Integration, so we'd thought about the people and the leadership and the culture and what we were going to have to do there. Cash, the cost, and the revenue were 3 different work streams. Let's validate the cash position, analyze the opportunities, and optimize them as quickly as possible. On the cost side, same deal. Analyze the opportunities, validate them, and optimize costs as quickly as possible. And on the revenue, how do we prioritize, analyze, validate, and prioritize the highest value opportunities? And then finally, we had reporting. You need data, you need metrics, you need dashboards, you need to know what's actually going on and be able to see things before they go wrong. So we built this 100-day plan. That gave me a lot of confidence that we would be able to mitigate the downside. And we had, most importantly, the right team in place to execute it, which I knew would remove a lot of guesswork. So that's tick number 3. Number 4, principle number 4 is don't wait for perfect conditions. Like, commit and then recognize you'll just have to adapt once you get going. Like, the deal was clearly not flawless. And to put that in context, we had 2 investment committees. The way your deals usually work, you have an investment committee, which could be, one person, or it could be 30 people. And you essentially present the case. This is the hypothesis. This is how much we think it's worth. This is how much we're going to buy it for. This is what we think we can do with it. This is how we're going to do that. What do you think? Should we buy it? That's basically an investment committee. And we had probably 90 to 95% of people say we shouldn't do the deal. Too risky. We're like, this thing's likely to blow up in our face. But you know what I realized? My chairman asked me, Sean, well, actually, the only person whose view really matters is, do you want to do the deal? Because ultimately, you're the one accountable for getting it right with your team. And that was a huge, scary moment. But I thought, you know what? As I said, I'd been through the upside was there. The downside, I thought we could be able to protect. The conditions weren't perfect, but once you commit, you just get going. You're fully committed, and you've just got to make it work. So we had to pull the trigger. And, you can prepare as much as you like, but then the real growth happens once you've committed and once you're prepared to adapt, because you move into like super rapid iteration cycles to adapt and change as you need to. So those were all ticks. The last one was fear. Fear is normal. But you're always questioning yourself, am I scared because my intuition is telling me it's the wrong thing? Or am I scared because it's high risk, high reward, and I don't want to look like an idiot, and I don't want to blow up everything I've worked for? Is it a calculated enough risk, or isn't it? And the fear was significant, like it was high risk, high reward, but we weren't reckless. We had a good team, we had a structured plan, and we thought we could cover the worst case scenario financially. And if you think about the difference then between like a bad bet and a good bet, preparation, execution, and your belief in your ability to adapt and solve problems as they come along. Like, that is ultimately the factor that's going to see you get to the other side, so that you are not going to abandon ship once it gets hard, because we knew it was going to get hard. So I hope when you're thinking about your current next big bet, whether it's a life bet, again, starting a family, getting married, moving countries, changing jobs, starting a new business, and I put that in the life camp because starting a new business is a big life impact. Or is it in the business camp, in your existing business? Is it hiring, new leadership team? Is it building new capabilities? Is it making a big technology investment? Is it doing, making an international market expansion? Like, have you got some big bet that's bubbling away, making an acquisition, raising capital, bring on investors? These are all big, huge bets. And if you have already taken big bets and you're like, you know what, I already took a big bet and now things are pretty comfortable, now you know that this next bet's going to be much harder. But if you work through these 5 questions or these 5 principles, hopefully you'll be able to rationalize whether it's the right bet for you to make or not. And so let me just replay what those 5 were. Number 1, big bets come with big trade-offs. So evaluate what is the trade-off, but recognize there's no reward without risk. So number 1. Number 2, principle 2 is reverse engineer the risk before you commit to it. Like, evaluate what's the worst that could happen, what's the best that could happen, and what do you need to be true for this to be a good decision? What has to happen for this actually to work out? Number 3, mitigate the downside. Prepare your plan before you jump. Think about how you're going to be able to protect and minimize the chance that the worst case will play out. What kind of preparation do you need to do? Number 4, if you've done all that, recognize you can't stay in preparation and mitigation space forever. At some point, the conditions are probably not perfect, but they're never going to be perfect. So if you've passed the first 3 checks, you got to say, am I ready to commit? Recognizing that once I press go, I just have to commit to being adaptable and moving and adjusting as I go through it until it works. That's number 4. If you're ready for that, then that's a tick. Number 5 is to just check your fear and recognize that if you're feeling fearful, it doesn't mean it's the wrong move. You need to ask yourself whether you're taking a calculated risk that's not reckless, or you're taking a massive gamble for which you're unprepared. Those are 2 different things. So if you're nervous, that's normal, and that signals growth, and that signals get prepared. And if it's a calculated risk, it might be a good one. But if you're feeling fear because you jumped the first points and you're just thinking, I'm just going to wing it, that might be telling you that actually you're unprepared and it is reckless, and that's why you've got fear. So do an internal check, make the best decision possible, and I absolutely wish you all the best in making a big bet that doesn't blow anything up and turns into an absolute cracker for you.